here. We
This is
talking
not my
about
topic. This was definitely Vernon's pick.
we talking about COVID-19, man.
And he said, if it goes good, it was my idea. If it goes bad, it was Brandon's idea.
Exactly. I do that with everything.
Ladies and gentlemen, greetings. Welcome to Difficult Discussions. We're on episode 4 now, and I had to deal with some technical difficulties. Two-step authentication is apparently not a thing with Facebook, at least not working properly. Anyway, we're here. So, tonight we're going to be discussing COVID, its impact, and the reaction to it. I've got some guests here today that you're going to be familiar with because they're the ones I always have. So let's start the introductions. How about the moderator? Introduce yourself.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. This is Stacey Deering, aka Professor D, your favorite professor out of the Metro Detroit area, specializing in urban politics.
She was a Raider for last week.
We'll have more. It'll be an even playing field today because I don't know much about this subject as far as officially. So, Vernon, you're going to fact check tonight. Introduce yourself, sir.
Vernon Burden, assistant principal, administrator, still in my office. We have parent-teacher conferences tonight.
Ooh.
Different type of parent-teacher conferences because no parents came, but all teachers were here. So shout out to our staff for coming and working through different climate of being in the middle of a pandemic. But still in my office, wasn't going to make it home in time, but I got my 2 screens ready, so I'm ready to do this.
I would have to say, with no parents, that does make that discussion very difficult.
Nobody complained to me tonight, so it's great.
There you go. Brandon, introduce yourself.
Oh, what's up, everybody? I'm your not-so-common redneck, and this is my, I think, 4th time on the show of all 4 times. We have a lot of fun. We discuss awesome topics and kind of take a little bit of jabs here at each other there, out of fun. But it's all good. We'll have a good time tonight. Hang out, watch, ask questions, offer to come on the show so that Johnny can have some new people.
We're trying really hard.
Yeah.
Speaking of trying, I've noticed for myself, as a slight introduction, that I have this habit and tick of really aggressively moving my head when I talk. And I'm sure that's very jarring for my viewers. I'm working on that. So we'll go from there on that. So tonight, the topic is COVID. And there's been some interesting elements that have played out today in the news regarding people's reaction to it, and I'm really looking forward to having that conversation. So I'm going to let the moderator lead us in a direction here of how we will proceed.
Okay, so I came up with a few questions that are basically hot topic questions surrounding the whole COVID pandemic that we have going on within Michigan. So in case you guys didn't know, but I'm sure you did, Michigan, when COVID first became really hard hitting in March, was ranked number 3 in the country as a hot spot. And now 7 months later, we're ranked number 33. So, and recently the Michigan Supreme Court strike down Governor Whitmer's executive orders, saying that it violated the 1945 constitutional amendment that allowed governors to create executive orders during an emergency. So now we are back at square one, talking about the mask, no mask, and strategies and being safe, etc. So having said that, my first question to you gentlemen is as follows. Looking at the case numbers and the death rates we've experienced in Michigan, and we've experienced at the national level as well, how do you feel about Governor Whitmer's approaches and strategies handling it?
Go ahead, Brandon. See the fire in your eyes.
I'm just going to start this off with, don't judge me. I absolutely cannot stand Gretchen Whitmer.
Oh, Lord have mercy.
I don't think it's necessarily because she's a bad person. I really didn't know much about her prior to the coronavirus stuff starting.
Okay.
One of my, several of my issues that all seem to relate to her are, when the coronavirus thing first started, Michigan has a slightly smaller population than Ohio, state to state basis. I did fact check that myself. we had significantly more cases in Michigan than Ohio had when this first started. And she was not showing leadership. Everything that she did, like, okay, we're going to shut down schools. We're going to shut down sporting events. We're going to shut down regular events. Like, everything that she did was play by play within like 24 to 48 hours after the governor of Ohio did it first. So I guess, how are you, as the leader of our state, the person that we look to as the top of what we would consider our local government, I guess, how are you going to take a state with a lower population, significantly more cases, and not be the one that tries to lead by making choices instead of waiting for another state that isn't affected nearly as bad to make the decision for you?
Interesting point. Well, I guess my feelings on how everything is played out, really, I look at the situation where we were dealing with significant unknowns, and it's easy to armchair quarterback or, you know, hindsight 2020 the situation, but given the circumstances of where we are, especially back then, it's really hard to judge. I will say that originally I did notice that she was very reluctant to shut things down, and she was saying openly how she did not want to do that. And then after doing it, it became like the thing. Now, I guess where I fall in this is kind of always in the middle, because I feel like there are things we should be doing to help stem the spread. However, I feel like a lot of situations are going above and beyond where they should. Case in point, like, I don't understand why the Dream Cruise was necessarily quote unquote canceled, because there were measures that could have been taken to still protect the citizens while at the same time allowing us to enjoy it. For instance, you know, not allowing people to go inside stores. Like, the stores could have stayed open. They could have done their commerce through the door, over the phone, through internet, what have you. There are measures. You know, there are people that I know that do a lot of things that are outdoor related that deal with vehicles. You are literally in your vehicle. So I don't understand why there would be an issue. And if you need to get out of your vehicle, again, there are steps we could take. Now, there's always going to be a measure of, you know, loss when it comes to things like this, where you cannot control everyone and they're going to do what they want to do. But at the same time, you know, you cancel the Dream Cruise, yet I'm still going to drive on Woodward because it's not illegal to drive on Woodward. So it's not really canceled. So what was the point? On top of that, in terms of her leadership, I would say that, you know, the science changes by the day. You know, there are experts that'll say one thing, and then the next day they get more information, and then that information may change. So, like, for the masks, you know, originally you look at a situation like, okay, well, if I'm wearing a mask, I'm breathing in carbon monoxide. Is that really good? Am I really doing anything? And you really think to yourself, well, the mask would really only be a benefit if you have it and you're stopping it from getting spread to others. However, the problem with COVID, which why it's become such a phenomenon, is that you can have it for weeks and not know it, and at the same time transmit it to a heavy degree. So I understand why they would request it. However, I don't understand people's reaction to it in terms of just violent aggression, you know, referencing oppression and things of that nature, you know, control. Like, okay, you've been asked to wear a mask that is not restricting you from doing things you need to do. Closing businesses may obstruct you in things you want to do because the businesses are not open. So that I can understand taking issue with from a personal standpoint of not liking it because you don't like it. I don't like doing homework. I don't like having to go to my room. Sometimes those are things that have to happen, though. So, you know, in terms of what she's done in being reactionary to Ohio, a lot of times in these situations, it's a dice roll. Like, I may make that initial decision and it could be a terrible decision and it could actually be a problem. And now I'm remembered for making a bad decision. So I can understand her perspective of maybe, you know, taking example from other places and doing what they're doing. And for a long time, we were actually doing very well with our numbers. So at the end of the day, I feel like it is potentially going a bit too far as the reach of these executive orders, but at the same time, I do understand why movement is needed. So it doesn't trigger me, I guess, is the best way I can answer that question.
I think I agree mostly with what you
I don't
said
hear you,
as
Brandon.
far as, can you hear me?
I hear.
I can
You
hear
do? Oh,
Yeah.
Okay.
Uh-oh.
there we go. I got you.
So for the most part, I agree with what you're saying. It doesn't, at this point, at this stage of the game, like, it doesn't really trigger me, I guess. I think towards the beginning, the part that bothered me was, you know, she wanted to shut down. Well, she didn't want to, but she felt like she was in a position where she had to shut down everything that was non-essential. Okay, so me personally, since I manage an auto repair shop, we're considered essential because doctors, nurses, firefighters, police, like all those people need to be able to go back and forth to work, and they have to have running vehicles to do that. I never got to take like 8 weeks off, 10, 12 weeks off like some of these people did. And I lost a lot of money because of that, because I'm managing an auto repair shop and I don't have any customers because nobody's driving, nobody's going anywhere. So, you know, I actually ended up laying a couple of my technicians off because they're paid based on, you know, a national labor guide. And if they're not actually wrenching on cars, they're not making money to stand around. I said, you know, you two go home, take a long vacation. If we get busy enough, I'll have you come back, but I'm not going to have you sit here and not make money. Me and one technician stayed so that we could at least keep the doors open. And I guess, you know, with everything being shut down, you're telling all these people to go home, stay in place, whatever. You can't go to the store and buy wood chips to do something in your own damn yard. You can't go to the home goods store and buy like pruning shears to like take care of bushes and stuff like that, or grass seed or anything. So it's like, you're basically telling me I have to sit in my home and not go do anything. If I don't already have it in my house, in my garage, there's a good chance I'm not going to be able to get it. Some of the other things that she said, how she was telling, for instance, Walmart, she wanted them to tape off sections of the store that were not considered essential needs, like healthcare products and food. She wanted them to like tape off the clothing area, the sporting goods area, all that kind of stuff, because it's not essential. Okay, so let's say these numbers are probably way off, but let's say you have 100,000 square foot surface area inside of a Walmart, and you've normally got 300 people packed into that store. Well, 100,000 people, 300 people, that's, or 100,000 square foot, 300 people is really not, you know, super packed together. You start taping off sections of the store that you consider non-essential, and you still have 300 people in the store, and you're blocking off 50,000 feet of it. You're now pushing people to be even closer together than they were before. I could understand saying, if you're going to go to the store, go in, get what you need, walk back out. Do not go in, do not browse, don't window shop. That's not what it's open for. And then some of the things that triggered me in the beginning were her saying, like, golf courses aren't going to be open. You can't go out on your boat or your jet ski, but you can take a canoe or a kayak out, no problem, as long as it's not motorized. What difference does that make? A boat is a boat.
I see what you're saying. I did encounter a little bit of that myself. I wanted to do some painting during that time to try to tackle some stuff, and I couldn't buy paint in can, but I could buy spray paint, which I thought was weird. Now, I was in the same boat as you as an essential employee because I work at a commercial service center, so obviously ambulances and things of that nature. So
yeah.
The majority of our staff was sent home, so it was just myself and my manager who picked up a wrench, and I went to the parts department, you know. So I never really got to experience the at-home aspect either, even though I was literally built for the quarantine. It's what I would have been considered my home element, you know, to not have to go anywhere. So I guess in terms of what you're saying, like, that's what I'm trying to get at when it comes to certain rules and regulations that were passed and it just kind of overreached. Like, you know, when I used to go into Meijer where I shop, I'm like, the whole time I'm like, you know, I'm seeing this lady walking around coughing while she has a mask dangling off of her cheek under her chin. And I'm like, dude, you know, so I'm in here We're in an enclosed environment. I have no idea if any of these people are sick, and I'm literally touching things they've touched, being in the same area they've been in. I don't feel safe, but I need to get these things. I have to have them. I need groceries, and then you have the people that were just buying everything in bulk absurdly, making it tougher for everyone else. So a lot of things, because they didn't, if you want to pass that rule where you're blocking off the store, why not pass a rule that says you cannot purchase more than X amount of a product? You shouldn't be able to buy 400 cases of toilet paper at one time. You don't need that. So I feel like there were rules and regulations that could have been levied that actually would have helped the situation. For example, if you as a business have to close, you should not have to pay any bills during this time. Like, the government should basically be, have set up a program where any bills you have, you're forwarded to the government, they take care of them.
Right.
So, or they just defer them or just put them on hold. So as a company, like say DTE isn't making money. At the same time, they're not paying anything. So if you're not paying anything, you're not losing money so just basically like put everything on pause. So if you can give $1,200 in stimulus to everybody and $600 a week or whatever it was, since I didn't get it, I don't know, to people, why not do that? Because now as a business, if I'm not spending money, it's not difficult for me to not be open. I'm just not making money. So like the restaurants, things of that nature, it's like you're putting these people out of business when really you should have been footing the bill. Because if you're telling them they cannot operate, you should be paying their expenses. Because it's one thing to not be open, but now you have shipments that come in that are supposed to come in, and now you have nothing to do with them, and it's perishable items. It's a very difficult situation. So I empathize with a lot of people who were put in situations where they could not work. I had the choice to go home if I wanted to. I chose to work. I didn't want to have to deal with the paperwork and logistics of trying to get unemployment. Just if I can work, I'd rather just be there.
Right.
So like I said, it could have been handled better from the state level, federal level, absolutely. But at the same time, and I have to touch on this because it's, what everybody is going to want to talk about, given that we're talking about COVID. Kidnapping her to put her on trial, I feel like is a bit insane. So we got to address the elephant in the room, so the people that are upset about it, I can understand the people that are upset if their businesses have gone under, or they've gone through economic strife. What I don't understand are the people that are upset that aren't financially being impacted by this. They're just being impacted on a social level. You're just upset because you don't want to be restricted. You don't want to have to wear a mask. You don't want to have to do this. You don't want to have to do that. I find that to be ridiculous. And those are the ones who are the most vocal. And they don't really have a leg to stand on here because you're not the one that's really struggling. If there's a business owner that says, man, I'm really stressed out. I don't have money. I'm going out of business. My bills are stacking up because they're not deferring my mortgage and things of that nature. I can understand why a person like that would want to potentially do something rash. But, the violence that we've seen perpetuated because of this, like elderly ladies at Walmart at the front telling people to put on a mask, getting accosted by roided out dudes that have guns on them saying you're threatening me. I'm like, that's not how self-defense works. So, the references that we've heard from people who aren't African-American, who are comparing this situation to slavery, I find to be highly, highly disrespectful. This is in no way comparable to the strife that people had to deal with as slaves because you've been asked to wear cloth over your face. And then, a lot of the situations where the mask is uncomfortable, I wear a sleeve that you just literally put over your face. They sell them like you buy 5 for like $20. Do they do anything? Probably not. But it gets me in and out of where I have to go. That's what it has to be. I can keep it around my neck. It's available 24/7 to me. I've had it on for a couple episodes of the show. So, again, you have measures to make things work if you want to make them work. There you go. So it's just like to ask someone to do something that can potentially save lives, and your answer is, screw you, it's inconvenient, is really telling it where we are as a country right now. We've become this situation where you take the brashness of the 80s, but now squeeze on a little bit of just pure hate. And that's now where we are, where people are literally having conversations where they don't care, you know, because most people will say, well, I didn't lose anybody, so it doesn't affect me. I don't understand why we have to deal with this. And then I have friends that say, well, I've lost 6 people. And the answer always to that is, oh. Like, well, you've heard the numbers. You've heard how many people have died. Well, it's only 2%. That's like 4 million people. Do they not matter? You know, so it just doesn't make sense where people are taking this hardline position against these measures when ultimately, if we get through this, we won't have to deal with it. But if we keep going against the grain here, it's not going to go away. We're going to have to continue dealing with the nonsense. So, you know, yeah, you couldn't trim your bushes. You couldn't lay down grass seed. You're alive. And people that you could have infected are alive. That, I feel like, at the end of the day, has to be the most important thing here. You know, we talk numbers and how it's not really that big of a deal. 4 million people is a big deal. 4 people is a big deal. I don't want anyone to die that's not supposed to die. And I certainly wouldn't want to know that I was the reason they died because I felt I didn't need to wear a mask because it was an inconvenience to me.
So
I know I'm long-winded here.
I'm
But go ahead.
Well, I'm
address-
going to ask you a follow-up. Well, do you want to
Yeah.
fact check first, Brandon? And
Well,
I'll
I'm
ask a
gonna
follow-up
go
question.
a couple of things, just kind of information on top of things. Some of the major things I agree with Brandon that it seemed kind of cyclical with what Ohio did, and what Michigan did. Even looking at the orders that came out of Ohio, Ohio shut down completely on March 22nd, and Michigan shut down completely with the stay-home order March 23rd. Michigan shut down gyms and salons and things of that nature on March 16th. Ohio did it on March 14th. But also, Ohio's first case, I mean, if you take timing, Ohio's first documented cases came on March 9th, and Michigan's came on March 11th. The other piece, kind of adding to kind of the dialogue, I don't want to call it a narrative, the dialogue is what the order did and what came out of the governor's office. So the Dream Cruise was canceled, but there are no executive orders that said the Dream Cruise is canceled. Now, an order may stop certain types of gatherings to where it gets to the point where facilitators and organizers of the event just said it's not worth having. And then my last one, I can kind of show. This is the list of executive orders as a public employee, administrator in the school. I had to look at each order and determine its impact on the school with our team to determine what was happening. When I look at something like Walmart or big box stores, if your plant wasn't in a certain section, you could have sold it. Plant seeds could be sold in stores without a square footage capacity. So if someone needed to get plant seed, they could have gone to Ace instead of going to Home Depot or Lowe's. But even some of I know this is how our dialogues kind of started. Even looking at memes of things that I saw, like you can't buy an American flag. That's up to the individual store of what they have in certain departments. So if your home goods had American flags, you could buy them. But if your gardening section had American flags, people could not buy them. It's not because of being anti-American. It's because of what was being limited capacity in big box stores.
Thank you.
Keep looking up.
So the follow-up question would be this, because you both, well, Brandon more so mentioned about following suit of Ohio, where government does it a lot, where they follow suit of other governments and other entities that have a success rate or have a solid plan. So it's not a secret. We didn't have a national pandemic plan when it rolled out. Now, there was a national pandemic plan and task force, when President Trump came into office, but when the pandemic actually happened, there was not a national plan laid out or a strategy or orders laid out for governors around the country to follow. So they kind of had to create their own blueprint. So how do you feel that impacts a governor's strategy on how to deal with COVID? If they had a national plan, do you think it would have been easier because everybody could have followed the same blueprint?
I personally don't think so, and the only reason I say that is every state has their population, their different numbers and stuff, city populations, urban versus rural and stuff like that. I think when it comes to that situation, I think that it was best left to each individual governor of each state to determine what the hot spots were, where the most populous areas were, where the spread was happening the most, and then try and make decisions and calls from there. I think, like I said, my biggest issue, like Vernon had, overread, was her following suit of Ohio. I mean, we have a smaller population, we have a significant more amount of cases, so we have a higher percentage. And we're following suit of what Ohio's doing, who's not having nearly as bad of a problem. Some of the other things that I, kind of question as far as like how it was handled with our governor is, well, one thing I wanted to get out is Johnny had said people were comparing it to like slavery. First off, if you were comparing putting on a mask to slavery, I'm sorry, you're an idiot. Like, just bottom line. I understand feeling like in some sort of way you're basically like cattle to the government and they're basically forcing you to do a bunch of things that you don't think they should be able to do. Unfortunately, they did. We did it. People argued. They bitched. I get it. I think some of the biggest issues that arose from that, with people just being blatant, like, I'm not wearing a mask, the hell with you, I'm not going to do this and that, is for Whitmer to come out and say, when she started the stay-at-home order thing and wear the mask and social distance, and people started to, go to the Capitol and sit in their cars and block roads and, whatnot, she kept coming out and saying, the longer that you guys do this kind of stuff, the longer we're going to have to wear masks and social distance. But then I believe it was not too long after she had said that, like within, I don't know, maybe 2 to 4 weeks or something like that, she was at a BLM protest, peaceful, with her mask on, but was like locked arm in arm with thousands of people around her that she doesn't know. She doesn't know if they're sick. She doesn't know if anybody there is sick. That's not social distancing, but you're sitting here on TV preaching social distancing and telling people that, are voicing their opinions that clearly go against what you want, that the longer they protest, the longer we're going to have to do this. But then you're going to go and join a protest and not follow your own damn orders.
I'm sure, Brandon, that will be fact checked to verify the timing on that. What I can say while he's looking that up is, you got it? Go right ahead.
Well, a couple of things. I am going to try and look up Whitmer's quote. I think, and this is only from my professional capacity, there's a big misconception of the ideal of mass social distancing, their composition thereof, and actually the spread of the virus. And that's actually changed over duration of time as you get more cases, as there's more of an understanding. But there's really a couple of things that we're looking at with COVID is positive tests, possible exposure, and being exposed to people that are positive. That's kind of what you're saying. So at the protest, the inherent danger of the spread is people that are there that are the possibility of exposure to people, and that same exposure to people that are positive. So the one is obvious. If you test positive, you should stay home. So you shouldn't be there. But people don't listen, right? Or they may not know that they're positive.
Right.
Two are the possibility of exposure. So really, I call this defense, there are two forms of defense since there's no vaccine and things like that. Mask coverings to limit possible exposure, not to eliminate, but possibly limit, and social distancing, which also is a limiting factor. And the third is exposure to people that are positive. One misconception is to be considered exposed to somebody that is COVID positive, you have to be within social distancing restrictions for a cumulative of 15 minutes unmasked with the exposed person. So when people go through the Gretchen Whitmer is not following her own rules, actually per CDC guideline, she had did, other than you could say not good to be around large volumes of people, but for actually limiting the spread, the number one thing, as CDC has continued to say, is wearing a mask. She could have also added the social distancing part, but I'll tell everybody out on Facebook, that's why a lot of people, a lot of schools are in buildings, is because those desks are not 6 feet apart, because those desks do not have to be 6 feet apart if you have a mask. If you do not have a mask mandate, desks must be 6 feet apart. Just throwing that. And then that protest was, I'll get the date back up. I'm looking at 3 screen.
It was definitely after George Floyd, so it was after May,
Right.
What was that, 27th, 28th? So it probably was like early June, early mid-June.
Yeah, it was definitely. I want to say it was probably beginning of June.
June 5th.
Okay.
But another thing, just to, without going through it, there's also been research conducted that shows that the coronavirus was not intensified or larger spread because of the uptick in protest. Back to you all.
So Johnny?
Well, I mean, some people will take that and make the argument, well, how can that be? And, you know, the reference that you hear, especially in memes and on social media, is it's okay to riot and protest, but it's not okay to go to church.
Mhm.
Well, again, you know, typically you have a situation where you're not really in close proximity to the same person over an extended period of time rioting. You're kind of on the move. And when it comes to protesting, many of the protests that you've seen, you have had people wearing masks. And again, unless you had a person who was in fact positive at the event, spreading it without a mask to other people, you're really not going to find an uptick there. You're just adding to the probability because so many people are close together. So, you know, like I said, I hear what you're saying, and in certain situations I do empathize, because like I was at a restaurant when they first opened the restaurants back up. My wife and I jumped at the chance to go to a restaurant, have something to eat. And they had the table separated where you couldn't sit next to another party, but across from us there was a family sitting at a table. Then I look 2 tables down and I see 4 kids and 1 person. They split that family up. And I just feel to myself, I'm like, that's ridiculous. They came here together. They're going to leave here together. So it doesn't matter if they're not sitting at the same table while they're eating. If someone at that group is positive, they will all get it. That's just how it works. So to separate the family is an overstep. It's an overstep that doesn't need to happen. And their justification, because I questioned them on it. I'm like, why would you make this family sit separate? Why do these kids not, how are they not able to sit with their parents? They said, well, if someone comes in, they'll get fined. So you're telling me an inspector would walk in the door, these 2 tables shouldn't be next to each other, fine, but no context as to why they're together. Because again, this group of people came here together, so I feel like those are the situations where if you're going to have rabble rousing to make change, those should be situations that are changed, because inherently they are preposterous. They are not going to do anything to stem the spread of the virus. But overall, I do understand why the measures are there. They do make sense. Whether you want to believe in them or not, it's something that has to happen. Now, none of that was really pertinent to her question, so I will answer that now. I feel like I agree with Brandon in the respect that states have different situations. So to have a carte blanche blanket scenario may not benefit everywhere. What's good for California may not be good for Michigan. So I do appreciate the opportunity for governors to have their own means to plot and plan for what they're doing, but to have no framework whatsoever, I think is a detriment. There should have still been, hey, if you have no idea what you're doing, do this. If you want to augment from that, you're welcome to do so, but at least here is something that you can follow if you need to follow something. So I feel like there should have been an overarching direction of what the plan should have been, because that's only going to lead to communication. So like if the people in Nebraska don't really have a handle on it because they're not too familiar, because they figure they're safe because they live so far apart from each other, and it may not be true, you need that framework to help prepare if there is an outbreak. So again, I don't necessarily fault her, and I feel like it's difficult for us being from Michigan to really conceptualize how the world feels about her actions as opposed to how we feel. But I just, got back from Vegas, driving across the country. I drove 30 hours one way. I hit many states along that path. And I got to tell you, the only state that was really what I could say taking it serious was Colorado. When we got to Denver, they were hardcore. Everyone had on a mask all the time. If you did not have on your mask, you were looked at as someone who was insane. On the way back, we actually got held up in traffic, had to go through detours because of fires. We didn't get back until late. We didn't get to eat dinner. Nothing was open. No room service. Good luck. Figure it out. So there are places that I feel like are taking it a lot more serious than we are in Michigan. But then again, the majority of the places we went, we got weird looks because of our masks, because if I walk into a store, my initial thought is to put my mask on. And a lot of people are like, well, they're looking at me like they think I'm sick because I'm wearing the mask, So I feel like overall, people probably look at Michigan like they're crazy, but there are other places that are taking it even more serious that everyone was just accepting of it. No one was really questioning it. You didn't hear anyone cracking wise. Everyone just abided by the rule and moved on. I don't know what the numbers are in Denver. I'm sure that can be looked up by our fact checker, but I'm really curious to see how they compare to Michigan, because it was almost totalitarian there. Like that you weren't getting in anywhere if you didn't have it on. You're just done. But like we were in Nebraska, we were in Iowa, no one had on a mask. And then in Vegas itself, you were only questioned if someone that worked at the place you were at walked by you. But they created their own loophole. If you were drinking an alcoholic beverage, you don't have to own a mask. Everyone that I encountered on the second day of being in Las Vegas had a full drink in their hand. They were literally buying drinks to just not have to wear the mask. I was eating one of my fuelings for food,
Smart.
watching my wife play a game, and a lady walked by and told me to put my mask on. I'm like, I'm eating right now. She said, in between bites. I'm like, so you're telling me I'm supposed to raise and lower this mask in between bites, but this lady right here can drink her drink unimpeded the entire time? That, again, is an overstep because it doesn't make sense. So, again, every place is different, so I could appreciate having their own opportunity to cultivate a plan, but we should have had an overarching plan to help us, to begin with. Because I feel like if she would have done a lot of the things she wanted to do a bit earlier, maybe we could have gotten through this a bit faster, because people wouldn't have been pissed off as quickly.
So that's the point, the standard. So like having like a national standard to grow from. For example, like the national minimum wage is like $7.50 or barely under $8, but each state has the right to adjust it based on their cost of living, and everything in their state. So right. I'm wondering if having a standard to go from would have gave them some type of latitude and leadership to go from like, okay, this is the national standard, but we need to tailor it towards what's going on in our state.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
I
so
feel
like a generic plan in motion for if it happens, and you're
right.
obviously allowed to, deviate from that if you feel it's necessary.
Right.
Now, I'm curious how Johnny feels about this.
Oh, wait, are you going to ask about masks or something else? Because I had a follow-up question. If you're going to ask about masks, it might be the same question.
No, go ahead.
Oh, well, the follow-up question was, why do y'all think wearing a mask or not wearing one has become so politicized? Like, it's literally aligned with people's political ideology. How does that happen?
It's a simple question, and a simple answer can be given. You are asking someone to do something they normally wouldn't do. So there are people who are going to object to it because they don't like change. There are people who are indifferent because it's just what needs to be done. And then you have the radicalization. And I think a lot of that radicalization, unfortunately, was politicized because our president played a very political game with COVID. It's a hoax. It's not real. Don't worry about it. It'll go away. So when you have the leader of the nation telling the people that it's not a big deal, and then you have a governor in your hometown telling you it is a big deal and you have to wear a mask, the question is, who do you believe? And a lot of times people will choose to believe whoever's telling them what they want to hear. So it's not a matter of what's right and wrong. Here's a guy that's saying I don't have to do something I may not want to do, and I feel like they should be the one we're listening to, so that's what I'm going to choose to do. So you don't have a national plan. You also have the leader of the nation playing it down, and then you have the state level trying to play it up. So now who do you believe? Unfortunately, people lose a lot of faith in the science because the science changes because they don't understand that's the nature of science. It has to grow and evolve and change. So when you watch the news every day about it and every day you hear something different, it again makes it hard for you to latch on to what they're saying. So it unfortunately was made political by politicians, and people are latching on because, again, it's what they want to hear. So if they made a mandate that said, mustard spreads COVID, we're going to put a stop to mustard. I don't like mustard, so I don't care. But people that really like mustard may take issue with that. And then if the president says, I love mustard, we're going to eat mustard anyway, they're going to go with the president because the president's saying what they want to hear. So then it really makes a matter of contention. But you know what? You're not really that willing to run into a Fed typically going about your day. You're going to run into the state level police that you deal with. And they're the ones that are going to enforce the laws that the governor has put in place. So again, you have to go with what is local to you because that's what affects you, regardless of what Donald Trump may tell you. It's a tough situation. But go ahead, Brandon. What do you got?
And what's your question? I'm intrigued.
Follow-up question to what you just said. Who the hell doesn't like mustard?
I hate mustard.
Johnny.
That is
I don't really like condiments of any kind, to be honest.
JJ.
Oh, okay. So now that's more understandable. I was thinking it was specifically mustard, but if it's all condiments, okay, I get it. There are a lot of other people like that. What I wanted to originally ask you about before that answer to her question is, it ties to COVID, not really the mask thing, but as far as here in Michigan, and I don't know how many other states got involved with similar kind of things, the extra money for unemployment. So
the
in
current
Michigan,
the current one that she actually got the grant from FEMA for that we have now.
yeah. So
Okay.
So originally in Michigan, I think the maximum you could get from unemployment was like $362 a week.
Right.
And then they had the additional $600 during the COVID thing. So now you're talking about $962 a week.
Mm-hmm.
So if I'm a person who makes, we'll say hypothetically $4,000 a month, that's not accurate, but that'd be nice. If I were to get my 362 plus my 600, I'd be getting 962 a week. So I would almost be what I would normally be making anyways. Now, then you look at a situation where this guy that works at McDonald's that works 35 hours, 40 hours a week, that only brings home $300 a week anyways, why the hell is that person getting $600 extra a week when they're used to surviving on less? Because eventually somebody's going to have to pay that back.
Well, I guess you'd be looking at it from a matter of averages, and I'm sure that's where they found their number to levy out. And that's the thing, like I said, I work, so I didn't get it. And I do feel ultimately, because a lot of my pay is commission based, since we lost a lot of customers, I feel like I may have lost some money. But I have to say, my place of employment, which I cannot mention due to issues with employment and social media, took steps to compensate employees that stayed working where my commission was not an issue. And to that, I thank them, even though I can't state who you are. Regardless, again, when it comes to the money side of it, you had a situation where a lot of people kind of were like, I'm just going to stay home. Like, if I can make this amount of money to not work, why work? And I've never had unemployment, so I've never had to go through the process. And I think the uncertainty of that and knowing that everyone around me was going to be filing at the same time too, and hearing about the delays that people had to deal with, I just felt that ultimately it wasn't worth it. You know, I like my job, so like I'm willing to work. And even in that capacity, I wasn't even doing my job. I was asked to do someone else's job who was not there. So fine, whatever. It was an experience. But ultimately, you know, when you talk about that McDonald's employee, yes, they probably made more than what they were going to get. However, if you look at the impact of especially a restaurant worker where their entire industry was shut down and they're uncertain that when they open back up, if they'd even have a job. So you saw, well, at least in my social circles, you saw a lot of fish fries and stuff going down on social media with that money. But I would hope that a lot of people actually tried to save it, not knowing if they would have a job or how long this would take. So I can understand and appreciate somebody that is less, you know, fortunate than myself getting that boost. And guys like me chose to work to help pay for it. You know, would it have been nice to sit at home and be on my PS4 all day? Like, hell yeah, it would have been a dream come true. But it just didn't play out that way. So, you know, I hear what you're saying, you know, and in terms of it has to be paid back. When it comes to the economics of the United States, we spend so much money on so many things that are unimportant, and we never question it. We never question why a pair of boots as a soldier, I'm sure you know this, has to be replaced regardless of the condition, because if you don't replace them, the budget for those replacements decreases. That doesn't make sense. If you need boots, you have funds to get boots. You shouldn't have to replace them. So that's a waste of money.
Right.
And we do that and we don't question it. It just goes on. It's the ebb and flow of the world. So it's always funny when I hear about situations where people do complain about the money we spend on certain things. It's like, well, maybe we'd be able to do these things easier if we weren't bleeding money in other areas. So that's another conversation in itself. So, you know, that dude that works at McDonald's, you know, I've seen a lot of McDonald's that aren't open anymore. So I'm glad he got that money for as long as he could get it, because who knows if it's working out.
So Brandon, my follow-up question to you would be about that. How do you think that the unemployment agency and the governors should have rationed out the money? Like, because either you make it equitable and everyone gets the same thing, or you try to create this scale and base it on their income, and it may come across as inequitable. You know what I'm saying? So how would you have been able to do that and not be perceived in a negative tone for practicing discriminatory practices, or, you know, sectioning out, saying, oh, if you worked in a restaurant business, you shouldn't get this. You should only get this if you worked in this field. You know what I'm saying? It becomes an issue of classism and division. So how do you think that should have happened?
So I think the biggest change that could have made a significant difference is if do the unemployment formula the way that you normally would, where the max is $3.62 and the minimum is $1. Now take that scale and say, okay, the bottom line is here and the maximum is $9.62 now. Use that same mathematical formula to figure out how much of that extra $600 a week should they actually be qualifying for, instead of just saying, I'm just going to hand you $600 a week. So for instance, like in my situation, I would 100% qualify for the $3.62 a week, because I definitely make more than $3.62 a week. Somebody that makes $250 a week on normal unemployment's not going to give them $3.62 a week. They're going to give them $200 and some odd dollars a week. They're going to get a percentage of what they would normally make and claim on, you know, their taxes, W-2s, things like that. So instead of just saying, here's $600, okay, well, this person normally would get paid about 66% of what the maximum unemployment is. So we're only going to give you 66% of what that $600 would be.
But wouldn't at the same time you figure that, I'm sorry.
No, I was going to say the good thing that came out of this, and Vern can fact check me on this, is that they figured out that, wow, Michigan unemployment system is a hot mess. We need to recalibrate and restructure it to be a more accurate reflection and avoid fraudulent activity. So
Oh,
they
yeah.
are going to come up with a new formula of how unemployment should be rationed out, especially during a crisis when there's like a pandemic supplement or federal aid being given out. So that's the like blessing, the silver
Yeah,
lining.
it took my fiance, I want to say, it took her probably a week of logging on several times a day to finally actually get her information in. And then I want to say it was approximately 7 weeks before she actually got her first pay period.
Ooh, man. The one thing about this, I learn something every week just by listening and fact checking, just going through. I mean, as of early June during the pandemic, so if we had to say the main lockdown phase of Michigan before a lot of restrictions were lifted, Michigan had already flagged almost 500,000, 340,000 unemployment claims that were fraudulent. Now, my question, I'm still trying to figure it out, is this is just me wondering, there would need to be a tier system. If I'm a commission employee, that's not fair because let's say I'm a consultant. During the summer month as an educational consultant, I probably make a ton of money because I can go on the consulting tour with districts and events and conferences and things like that. But in the winter, when in the bulk of a school year, you don't get as much consulting money.
Right.
So how do you equitable? And that's big time money. What if I'm just a waiter or a bartender? My salary says I make $2 an hour compared to the $400 I make a night working at the bar. How do I that unemployment when I make more than that? Would you do it based off of people's taxes, taxable income that they've had?
It's got to be based off of taxable income, and that just goes to show you that perfect example that you just gave, where waitresses make like between $2 and $3 an hour, plus they get their tips, right? So most waitresses, whatever that I've met are they're the kind of people that are going to make their $2 to $3 an hour, and they might get $150 a night in tips, but they're probably only claiming about a third of that on their actual taxes. That's why you get screwed.
Or like when a billionaire only pays $750.
Because they know how to do the write-offs and the tax. So you have to have a good tax accountant if you are an entrepreneur, so they can show you what to write off so that you can have like a fair shot at it, just like a millionaire would.
As we talked last week, first thing to do when you get drafted into the NFL, get
Start a
yourself
nonprofit.
a foundation.
Yep.
Now
Start a
that you have a
nonprofit.
foundation, you went to a school to sign up. That would have normally cost the school $10,000. You did it for you ate that cost for that school.
That's true.
I agree. And you also got to look at, Brandon, the aspect that if they were going to go buy taxes on it, which is what they claim they did for the stimulus package to see if you were going to get it or not. But if they were trying to gauge actual amounts with taxes, the amount of time that would have taken to actually give people money, and they would have done it alphabetically. So if your last name is Xander, oh boy, you may still be waiting to get that first check while they calculate all that information. So I understand it's a hot button situation, and we're not just talking about just normal unemployment here. We're talking about the state has shut down. Pretty much everyone is filing. You need to have a system in play that works quickly. Because 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 weeks later, now we have a problem, because most people will tell you if you don't pay a bill for 2 months, that's when it's a problem, because they're going to come for you. So if you're getting into week 7 and you still haven't gotten that first check because they're trying to figure it out, I get where they're coming from, and I understand why they did a blanket amount, because that was the easiest way to distribute the funds to everyone quickly. Because it's an emergency. This is not a normal circumstance. This is not something that we as a society would normally deal with. So we can't really gauge their reaction to it on what we would normally do. Because, again, this is unprecedented, as they'd like to say so often. Uncertain times, blah, blah, blah. So, again, I'm not going to be worried about what that McDonald's employee made. It doesn't affect me. I'm glad for them. If they were able to get a new pair of Jordans and do a fish boil, great. I'm glad you were able to do that. It is what it is. like Vernon said, how many fish fries is these millionaires doing? Because Amazon, Facebook, lots of companies have made money in this pandemic, made hand over fist money, and are now even more rich than they were before during a pandemic. So if that money is being generated, someone's spending it. So, again, it's not really on us to question other people's pockets, because that's not really important.
My biggest concern is once they get all this stuff kind of straightened out with the unemployment, like when it comes time to, okay, well, we're going to, adjust where money is put throughout the state. We're going to try and discuss potential tax increases and decreases. You've now spent a lot of money handing out people money that was way above and beyond what they would normally make. Just sitting here increasing the amount of debt that the state of Michigan now has. Somebody's got to pay that back. And if that's
that was
people
from
like
the
me,
federal government, though. So that didn't come out of Michigan's budget. So that 600 was called FUPA or FPPA or something like that, because it was a federal stimulated supplement. And that's what they're battling about in Congress right now. That's part of that whole stimulus thing that Trump said, I'm not going to pass it until I'm reelected, because it was a federal supply from the federal budget. It wasn't supplied from the state. That's why everyone across the country got the exact same amount, pretty much, because it wasn't provided by each state. Now, what's in place now, FEMA, what happened was the governor applied to FEMA for a grant to add that extra $300 to your unemployment check. So that's still federal money, because that's from FEMA. So that's not something that has to be paid back. It was a grant. So it's not coming out of the state budget more than any other supplement. So what is coming out of the state budget, though, is that you have, a large volume of people filing because they're still not working, or they're underemployed trying to catch back up.
Right.
And just a couple of things. Money that has come from this, I think what we're getting in discussion about is kind of roles and responsibility. And it's fun when it's something bad that people want to complain about, that person did it. And when it's something good, and make sure I get all my credit. But money that's gone all around, CARES Act money, out of the money that we've seen, that's from the first stimulus bill. The bill that's on the table that's kind of squashed right now is the HEROES Act. And one thing that happened during the pandemic is people are getting a lot of lessons of how bills happen. I guess they missed the after school specials, only a bill. And a lot of controversy came from the original date of the CARES Act to give the conspiracy theorists some energy, where they saw actually from 2019. So they're wondering, how can you already know that you needed this money? All that happens is earmarked funds get pulled from one bill that was already on the table, and now people just add to that. And that's why a lot of legislation can't go through, because people still have things on the bill from 4 years ago that they don't want on there. So they're not going to vote yes for that. But you can blame them for your bottom line on paper.
So how do you guys feel about the HEROES Act for all the people that were essential workers that stayed working through it?
I feel like I am an essential employee, and I'm sure like you did, I had to have that sheet of paper that stated such when I was driving around when you weren't supposed to be on the road going to and from work. But I don't feel that I needed it. You know what I'm saying? I don't feel that it was necessary. I have to be in contact with many people that I've typically never seen before. And a lot of those people are blue collar employees that don't particularly care too much about COVID, or they don't have time. Regardless, I've been coughed on. I've had to deal with it, so it's I go out and I've had certain people say, oh yeah, I had COVID back in March. Why are you in here? And it's just a situation you have to roll with it. And I feel yes, I've taken measures above what I would normally do given this circumstance now of how I go about my day and how I deal with things. But I don't feel that I'm any way absolute about it. I could do better, I guess you could say. But here I am today, and to the best of my knowledge, I do not have COVID. So, yes, I'm in the thick of it. But when you say HEROES Act, when I think about that, I think about the people working in hospitals, because you are directly in contact with people who are more than likely sick. And that's where those funds should go. Those are the people that are putting their lives at risk 100%. Like, am I putting myself at risk going to work? Sure. I'm not tasked directly with interacting with people that are sick, though. If it happens, it's a freak occurrence, and it's unfortunate. These people are literally employed to be in contact with sick people. I feel like they are the ones who should be getting that money, and really the only ones that should be getting that money. You know, police officers, you have to respond to calls. You may respond to a call where someone has collapsed because they have COVID. So, yes, you are a hero. You're a, EMT, you're a hero. You're a nurse, you're a hero. Doctors, you make enough money. But, but seriously, those are the people that should really be getting those funds. Like me, sitting at a desk, writing up trucks, it is what it is, man. I chose to be there. I didn't have to be there. It's essential, yes, but at the same time, I'm making a choice. Whereas a nurse, doctor, EMT, you kind of have to do your job. It's not a matter of do you want to, you have to.
Okay. So I'm actually kind of, I don't know, I'm controversial with myself on the whole Heroes Act thing.
It's a safe place.
What?
Be free. Say what you want.
So do I agree that, hospital employees and like frontline type people deserve compensation for being in the situation that they're in? Yes. Now, on the same hand, those people chose that damn career knowing that they were going to be faced with potential health risks from other people that they're working with. They chose that career. Just like people that say stuff about Blue Lives Matter. There is no Blue Lives Matter. Those people are a job. They chose to be police officers. They knew the dangers before they went in. And then there's situations like mine. I was able to work. We were essential. The only thing, honestly, that prevented me from going home and collecting the extra $600 a week, whoops.
Your camera doesn't agree.
Yeah, the camera said nope. So the only thing that kept me from going home and doing that was if I wasn't there to manage the auto repair shop and had my best technician by my side, my biggest concern was that I wasn't going to have a shop to come back to. So I stayed there, and in the, I'm going to say approximately 2 months that we were just unbelievably slow with hardly any work to do, I probably lost about $3,000 of my normal income. So
I hear you.
It was nice that everything picked back up. Like my boss kind of gave me a little bit extra to try and help out a little bit. It definitely didn't get me anywhere close to where I would have been had things been normal. So, and because I didn't want the business to not be able to reopen because it just completely shut down, there was nobody there to run it, I feel like I would deserve a portion of that Heroes Act. I mean, in the automotive industry, if police don't have cars and firefighters don't have fire trucks and, EMTs don't have ambulances to ride around in because of people that work on cars and keep their shit running, nobody's doing anything. If truck drivers don't have people to fix their semi-trucks to transport groceries and food and medical supplies, people don't have the stuff that they need to have.
I agree with what you're saying there, but I'm looking at it in the perspective of like where you say they chose that job. Would it also be fair to say then that knowing that you made a choice to do a job where you were putting your life in danger, you would expect the government, when in need, to lean on you and compensate you for that dedication? It's not like you made a choice to be an officer and did not realize that your life would be put in danger. You're like, whoa, I didn't know that was on the table. Like, you knew it, you accepted it. And that's the determining factor between a hero knowing that inherent danger and still choosing to do so. And I understand where you're coming from as far as a business. Like, yes, I could have gotten sick. And more importantly, I guess in this terms of conversation, is that business was bad. We were at work and weren't really working. Like there was a week where I literally was just in the parts department putting stock away because it had accumulated for a week and no one was there to put it away. I didn't really sell anything. And a lot of people will call and I'm like, look, I don't normally work in this department. If it's easy, I'll help you. If not, COVID. So ultimately, the revenue that we brought in probably wouldn't have been considered worth it to be open, but we had to be open because, like you said, especially I literally work on commercial vehicles. It has to be done. But, I feel like, maybe if my own, owners didn't try to take care of us and help us out, with the situation that we were in, yes, I would have definitely needed, those funds and would have been grateful that I had them. But, we weren't in that position. So I guess I'm on the other side of the coin where it's like, yes, I see that funds are going to people that may not need them, but I also see that I was not in a direct position to need those funds. So I'm okay with not getting them. And I'm sure that if you went through particular channels, you probably could have gotten something. And, the way that Heroes Act is written, it really looks like you would be privy to it if they're able to get that pushed through. So I'm not saying you shouldn't have it. I'm just saying that, I'm cool that I didn't get it. And I'm also cool that I didn't get any of that unemployment, because there were a lot of people that I work with that were like, we should have just gotten that $600 regardless. It shouldn't have even been something to apply for. Everybody should have got it, because we're actually here working and not getting compensated, So it's a tough situation, but at the end of the day, I feel like the biggest impact here are the businesses that closed. So if you're a business owner and you had to literally shut your doors, like there's a restaurant not too far from my house. Yeah. I used to go to a lot, right off the lake, and they're closed. They've been closed since March. I don't know if they're going to reopen. I don't understand how they're able to maintain without doing any business. So it's concerning, because it's like, man, I used to go in there for a lot, and it's like, okay, well, what are those people doing? They've obviously had to go through other means and look for other jobs. So are you even going to have any employees if you want to open again?
Right.
So those are the people I empathize with. And granted, yeah, he's a business owner, so corporation's corporate, but it's a local business. It's not, a corporate restaurant chain. This is a person who's impacted. So I feel like they should be the ones getting the most help, because if those businesses close, that's less revenue for people to make.
Yeah, and that's one of the things that I was honestly bringing up on a regular basis. Like my 2 employees that I laid off, like they would call me, I don't know, every 3 days, and they're like, Brandon, like, are you guys busy? Are you coming back to work? Blah, blah, blah. And it was almost like at some points I felt like they thought that I like wanted them to be laid off and I could just be at work and make money. And I was like, I don't think you guys understand. I'm making 30% of what I would normally make to be here to make sure that you guys have a place to come back to when this is over. Like, I'm not making anything right now. And one of the other things that I constantly brought up is, when things got kind of shut down and got dicey and whatnot, what about these mom and pop shops, restaurants that were, just privately owned by a husband and wife that have owned it for 30, 40 years? That's all they have. And once that, shuts down and they don't have the money to reopen it, then you've got, people that relied on that business they've had most of their life and spent countless blood, sweat, tears, money to keep open and running and be successful, is now just gone. They have no income, and at 60-something plus years old, if you've been doing that most of your life, you're not going to go to college. You're not going to go start a new career. What are you going to do?
Well, that's why I was saying that, I feel like the measure that should have been implemented was literally, if you are a business owner and you cannot operate, everything you have to pay as an expense should be deferred. If it has to be tallied up and submitted at the end of the month, there has to be a program. There has to be something that can be there to save those businesses, because it's not that the economy's bad and people just aren't coming out to spend money. You were literally telling people they cannot spend money with me. So what choice do I have? Because again, that's the problem here. Those bills kept coming and you have to pay.
Those bills don't stop.
So that's what should have happened. When the state shut down, everything should have shut down. I shouldn't be hearing stories about people getting evicted because they're 2 months behind and they haven't worked for 2 months. So it's like, that's ridiculous. I'm not working because I chose to just stay home. I'm not working because my place of employment is not open and I don't have a choice. I can't go apply.
I want to make sure everyone understands the whole eviction thing. That should not have been allowed. My mom works for property lawyers. I've done process serving for her and those property lawyers. I want to say, and I'm not 100% sure on the exact time frame, but I think it was somewhere towards the end of March or sometime in April where there was an order put out that was basically telling anybody that does pay rent, as far as like their dwelling that they live in, that was being deferred, I think, until like August something. I think it was like the end of August. And then Trump actually, towards when that happened, actually extended it through January 1st.
Yep.
People are not getting kicked out of their homes.
No, there's no eviction. There's a ban on evictions until January 1st, 2021.
So how does that work January 1st though? Okay, can we evict you on the 1st? I mean,
they would have to extend it because, I mean, look, we're still going to be in the crisis. So they would just have to keep extending it every 90, 180 days because we're still going to be in this. We not coming out no time soon. You can see that. But what you just mentioned, Johnny, about they should have made it to where business owners had everything deferred, that should have been a part of a national standard and funded by a federal grant so that wouldn't even be on the states or the companies that they have the loans with and the bills with. You know what I'm saying? So that could have been a part of the national strategy. So I got two more questions for y'all. One is a quick one though. So we're talking about economy versus public health right now is what we're really talking about. So my question is, do you think that Governor Whitmer's strategy saved more lives or ruined more lives?
Oof.
When you say ruin, that's a broad statement.
So when I say ruin, because you have so many people that have kind of painted that narrative like she's ruined my life because I don't have my business, I don't have my quality of life I once had. My kids can't go to school. We can't have a normal outing. We can't have, those things. So, but even her strategy save lives or jeopardize the quality of life? So I'll say it like that instead of ruined.
Can I reframe that?
Sure.
Of course.
Because I think just going back to kind of these discussions started, kind of how social media responds to things instead of people talking to people, really is a balance between do you think that she saved lives that would have been lost to coronavirus, or did she ruin lives, whether increase in suicide rate, family structure dismantling because of divorces, those type of things that we could say are ruining lives outside of coronavirus. So did her orders save health lives but jeopardize social and emotional needs of Michigan?
I feel like no matter how you frame that question, that's a very difficult question. The reason I say that is a lot of the people that have gotten sick with coronavirus that have actually had severe health issues, life-changing health issues, passed away, lost life, were people that had pre-existing health conditions to begin with. And those people with those kinds of issues, they could have had a health issue that caused death or serious hospitalization any given time without coronavirus having any factor in it. But then when you take all of the executives, stay home, stay safe, wear a mask, stay away from people, don't do this, don't do that, there are a significant amount of people in this state, and especially across the country and the world, that do suffer from severe anxiety, depression, and things like that. And there's a lot of people that don't believe that those are real sicknesses. I've seen it. It's real. It's not a joke. So when you take somebody that gets even the little bit of enjoyment of just driving to the store, going into the store, being able to see other people, even if they don't speak to them. They might be the person that walks to the grocery store, goes in, has a few things they need to get, and just seeing a husband, wife, and their child walking through the store is enough to save them that day from taking their own life. The suicide rate, it exponentially increased, because those people now are trapped inside their homes alone with nothing but the ability to potentially talk to somebody on the phone, compared to being able to do any even simplistic thing that keeps them alive day to day.
All right, well, I'm looking forward to bouncing off that. I am a diabetic, type 2. It's under control. Shout out Octavia. Now, as a diabetic, I am considered a high-risk person. So I don't subscribe to the belief that just because I have diabetes, if I was to die to COVID, it is what it is. Quote, Mr. President. So I don't buy that. What I do buy is the fact that I feel like if you want to talk numbers, I'm sure you found an uptick in domestic violence with people being stuck at home who were in situations where it probably wasn't best for them to be stuck in a house together for an extended period of time. And that is unfortunate. But at the end of the day, when you look at how this virus works and how it's transmitted, we all could have been infected. And very likely the majority of us would have survived it, even without complications. The problem is, when it comes to COVID, you can infect people and have no idea that you're doing so, and you have an opportunity for that chain of infection to get to someone who is affected, to get to someone who could die. And even if you didn't do it directly, your actions, even weeks later, could result in someone's death who was not planning on dying that day, who was not looking to die that day. But unfortunately, you went somewhere, infected someone who infected someone who infected someone that they know that came in contact with them because they didn't know they were infected. And they could have been doing everything that they need to do, but now they're gone. So the means are justified because we are in a situation where if we took no action, if we did what the non-maskers want to do, we could be looking at a situation where we have no ancestors because they're all dead, because we didn't take simple measures to help with that. Now, when it comes to businesses, again, say what you want about Gretchen Whitmer, she would not have had the power to do what I'm wanting to do. Again, I agree with Stacey where that should have been a federally mandated situation. But if you're going to tell businesses they can't operate, you have to do something to keep them afloat in that time period. You can't just tell somebody, well, you're not allowed to make money, by the way, and Bill's doing it first. That's the problem. That's where we really, if you go back to 2008, everyone talks about the housing crisis, you know, how we were doing mortgages and how it turned everybody upside down. No one's referencing the fact that the oil companies were allowed to raise the price of oil to astronomical levels, which taxed on businesses because they had to raise their prices or pull back because they were paying more in expenses for fuel, which shut everything down. That was the genesis of the problem. And it's done by futures. You have people sitting in a room that decide oil is going to be this much today because a pipeline broke. Even though the oil is already here, we're going to charge more for it to compensate for the loss that we have over here. So that was allowed to happen, which shut down the country, basically, crippled us, you know, almost put the big three out of business. And I work for one of them, you know, so we've seen how this works. We've seen how this plays out, and we're always reactionary to it. Something bad happens, we react, and we try to catch up, where this could have been something that was handled from day one. Like, look, we got to shut the state down. First thing we need to do, whatever bills you have, submit them online, so you don't even need to talk to a person or be in person with someone. Submit your bills, scan them, get them online to us. We process it, we pay it. You don't even have to defer it. The government just pays it. It's done. Now, if you were submitting, you know, Lover's Lane bills and things of that nature, no, they shouldn't be compensated. But legitimate bills should have been taken care of. Utilities,
gas,
housing
water, electric,
should be taken care of. You know, and that I feel like would have alleviated so much of the stress that people have from a financial standpoint. And those people that you reference with anxiety, where I can see your point with that and how anxiety is a very important thing. However, I will say that the potential loss in life that I'm sure Vernon is going to fact check here may not line up with the lives that potentially could have been saved. And I'm not going to sit here and say just because you're sick and you have heart disease or you have diabetes or you're old, your death is just acceptable.
Just a death sentence.
I'm not saying that's what you're saying, but in result, you are comparing those potential deaths with the potential deaths of someone with anxiety who may or may not be here anymore. But then again, you have people that are alive that may or may not. And clearly, since they're still alive, those medical conditions were not going to kill them because they're still here.
Right. And that's a walking on eggshells thing before Vernon starts shooting out facts is I don't by any means think that, you know, anybody with pre-existing health conditions, you know, because they're already at risk deserves to, you know, not be accounted for. But in the same sense, I mean, it's hard to have that portion of topic or conversation because you've got one side that says, yeah, because I have pre-existing health conditions, I'm more at risk. So everybody needs to stop moving, put on masks, stay home, shut down businesses. I'm okay with it. What about the people with severe depression? I bet the amount of people in this country that committed suicide during this pandemic is probably more people than have died from COVID. And it's hard to have that conversation because you don't want to say that people with depression don't matter as much as people with pre-existing health conditions that might die from COVID, or the people with pre-existing health conditions that are more at risk for COVID are more important than people with depression. None of them are more important than the other, but we would really have to see numbers to know how much of an effect it really had. I feel like you
can't quantify the lives that have been saved, though, because you can't know that they would have died. Right. The thing you can quantify, though, is a person with anxiety still has options. Yeah. Like, you have options even though you're in your home, be it medication, be it outreach, you have options, whereas you don't necessarily have an option to be infected by someone else who just doesn't want to wear a mask. So that's where you have to compare, where you don't say that one is more important than the other. You recognize that even though you may be at home, you still have measures available to you to help you in crisis. Whereas I can be affected by COVID outside of my control. I don't have to do anything. I can stay home and literally be infected by someone else if I don't live alone, who is out and about, who does X, Y, Z, and comes in contact with someone else like that. So, it's not that we're saying, well, you got to stay home and we don't care. There are outreach programs, there are phones, there's so many different measures as far as someone who is struggling. Now, I will say, when it comes to the domestic violence, that's where I was concerned, because now you're in a situation where even if you need help, you may not be able to get it. And that's what's a concern, and I don't know what was done, if anything, to help stem that. And I feel empathy for those people who are suffering in that situation. Go ahead, Vernon. I know you're ready.
A couple of things. So I'm going to hit a couple of points. First are kind of the death numbers and the comparison between suicides and COVID-19. This is the most recent one I can find, quickest up to date. From the CDC, August 1st, there were 100, and obviously we know it's more now, there are 154,000 coronavirus deaths in the United States since up to August 1st. There were 48,000 deaths from suicide, and that's including the entire.
Because I don't know if there are some people on here that are watching that want to take this position, so I will be the one to play devil's advocate. The first thing people are going to say when they hear those numbers is that person was shot 2 times in the chest and they classified it as a COVID death. So even if you wanted to half those numbers, where some of those situations were not COVID, you were still above the suicide rate. So just to throw that out there to play devil's advocate.
But even I'll have that one already prepared tonight. COVID death means that you are a test positive and that COVID has impacted even a pre-existing condition. So there is no data of fact, and especially it comes from like a death certificate in Florida that gets circulated on social media. There are no standards for coroners, medical professionals, to classify things that are blatantly not the cause of death and name COVID in them. Someone dies of a gunshot wound, even if they test COVID, it may be written that during the autopsy, this person was positive for COVID. It also will be written that their blood type. It will also be written their height and weight, which are not factors of their death. But moving past that, that was the first data on deaths. I also wanted to look at pre-existing conditions, because that gets thrown around a lot. And for me, I even had to say, well, what are pre-existing conditions? Adults 65 years of age or older, chronic lung disease, liver disease, chronic disease, obesity, neurological disorders like Parkinson's, dementia, diabetes, heart disease, immunocompromised individuals. And when you really break down some of those, a lot of them kind of tie in together. So even obesity It's actually the factors. Obesity leads to a diminished immune system. All of the potential for heart disease. All of those things are tie into each other. So then I wanted to see, well, okay, so what does that actually mean for Americans? And in the United States of America, 40% of Americans are considered obese. 40%. I'm not trying to put my height and weight out there to people, but I am 275 pounds.
Yeah, I'm considered obese. I'm 200.
5 days a week.
And I'm 5'11".
Grossly obese. Morbidly obese.
Vernon did not tell everybody that he's like 6'12".
I'm not that either. But all right.
In my sense, I should weigh 180 pounds. I think my leg weighs that.
But I just brought that up because a lot of these, it kind of led me down this rabbit hole. Well, what does that mean for percentage of people in the United States? Just looking at the numbers, 55 years and older, so I took even 10 years off. There are 70 million Americans that have at least one or more conditions that are listed as pre-existing conditions that are over the age of 55. So it's kind of hard. Now, I will also say I've always been sensitive to COVID because when it first came around, I was like everybody else. What is this? It's probably like swine flu, bird flu, whatever flu we had.
Murder hornets.
I lost my aunt. I lost an uncle. I lost 4 colleagues in Southfield Public Schools. And this is all before in May. I lost a former teammate who was 14 years old. And of all these people, only one of them was over the age, or 2 were over the age of 65. And it kind of ties back into this. A lot of these pre-existing conditions, these aren't people that would fail physical. That's the easiest way I can put it. If you're looking at some things are like diabetes, heart disease, things like that. Those are a little bit easier to observe. But for the most part, a lot of these people, if they did not get COVID, the other elements of some of these factors would not have been life-threatening without COVID. So
I'm
yes,
sorry for your loss. I just want to say that, obviously.
Yeah, absolutely.
but the main thing is, my mother's diabetic. I have a nephew that's diabetic. Johnny just mentioned a lot of people live with it, but getting COVID is what. So it's kind of it's not false. It's just kind of misleading when the pre-existing conditions comes up, because pre-existing conditions, a lot of people have them, volume.
Right.
But then also going back to suicides, and then I'll be done. I did want to look into COVID-19 and the impact on suicide rates, even without the numbers. A lot of factors that from this research I'm reading is kind of hard to gauge, to kind of pinpoint if coronavirus or executive orders led to suicides, because the things that lead to suicide or put people at risk of suicide: social distancing, isolation, economic stress, barriers to mental health care, so not being able to see your therapist once or twice a week, constant and pervasive collective anxiety, increase in gun sales, frontline workers. So it's a lot of factors that also come in that are factors that lead to all suicides, and it is exaggerated or exacerbated because of the situation. So that isolation is 100% of your life instead of segmented. That's it. I got a whole bunch of stuff, but whatever.
Y'all ready for my final question?
Yeah.
Yes, please.
Okay, so it's a hypothetical question, but I want y'all to be unapologetically honest. All right?
That's my specialty.
Yes. So if Rick Snyder was still the governor today in Michigan and he utilized the exact same strategies or very similar strategies as Governor Whitmer, would he be criticized or viewed the same? Because remember, he had the whole Flint crisis that he had to deal with, and he didn't take as much heat as Governor Whitmer is in a pandemic. So I want to know. Go, Brandon, go.
Go ahead, sir.
Rick Snyder would still be the biggest dumbass governor that history has ever seen.
Well, that's not answering the question, because the question is,
That
would
was
he
right.
be
That was his commentary. Tell me your answer. I mean, I got the unapologetic.
Bottom line, you have children who are affected to this day because of that water, which still hasn't really been remedied yet. And the amount of money that it would have cost to fix, we've spent in droves in other areas. So this man made a business decision that didn't play out and didn't know how to rebound from it, and people suffered for it. And the fact that people in California know that Flint doesn't have clean water should tell you how much of an impact across the country that it made for people to hear that the state that has the most fresh water in the world has a city that doesn't have clean water to drink. Now, you say what you want politics-wise. He kind of should have been prosecuted for his inaction. It was negligent. It was negligence, clear negligence. So
But
you're talking.
there's no kind. He should be in prison.
I got it. I won't be the antagonist to this one. First off, I could care less about Rick Snyder. I think one of the bigger things is, which I love all my conservative friends, I hope you're watching, where I'm confused is you must have sat on your ass on the 2018 election, because all you do is complain about mail-in voting, which we call in Michigan absentee. So that was on the 2018 ballot. Weed is legal for recreational purposes, but you complain about the moral fiber of the state of Michigan. Should have woke up for that one in 2018. And we got Governor Whitmer in 2018, and she didn't win it by a couple of points. But the better question would be, would Bill Schuette, which a lot of you people that sat at home,
The AG, yep.
would
Former
it be,
AG.
would Bill Schuette be criticized so much if he had won the in 2018 compared to Governor?
So if he was the governor now instead of Governor Whitmer, yeah.
But I'll also say, if the president doesn't tweet about a woman from Michigan in mid-March, would you be criticizing the governor? Because Governor DeWine in Ohio has had protests at the state capitol in Ohio. There have been protests in Texas. All 50 states have had some form of protest and demonstration in rebuttal to some form of stay-home order or regulation. Every one of the 50 states. But you only hear about these Dem-run states with a Republican House and Republican Senate.
I don't think it would matter who was the governor. I think we're living in a society of people that think that they're entitled to have all these like things, and anybody that's threatening change by force or saying you have to do something, I'm making it a rule or a law, is going to fight against it. And I don't think political party really makes any difference, because you're not going to tell me as a free American that I can't do what the hell I want to do. And with social media, people are able to voice that openly on a regular basis, and they do.
But the whole nature of America is that you are free to do whatever you want, but you're not free from the consequences. So yes, you are free to not follow a rule, but you are susceptible to the consequences of doing so. So you have to make that decision that I'm going to choose to go against the grain and do what I want, but you also have to be able to accept the consequences of those actions. So if there are fines to be levied, possible jail time, you made that choice and you were free to make it, but you made it. So you got to make that and lay in it. So
absolutely.
I mean,
but
again,
the
like,
main battle with what you're saying was the fact that people were saying, I understand what she's trying to do, but what she's trying to do goes against my rights as a person. And people brought up constitutional rights and all that kind of stuff.
All rights aren't absolute.
And I don't disagree with you on that, but I'm just saying that was the biggest battle, was people were saying they understand what she's trying to do, but the way that she's going about it is not legal.
Well, let me just be crystal clear about this question. This question is based on sexism and gender, because I, as a woman, I am very confident that if she was a male governor, whether she was Democrat or Republican, Libertarian, etc., she would have that governor would not have been scrutinized like she was. I promise you, the fact that she is a woman in leadership had a lot to do with the scrutiny level. Like, Yes, people felt like their civil liberties were infringed, but I'm telling you that undertone of sexism is there. Y'all have to see it, especially after today and after yesterday, all the memes that came out about Senator Harris and then the whole kidnapping thing on Governor Whitmer. I'm telling you, if she was a man, it would not roll out like this. Like, so tell me from a male perspective, what do you think about that? Because you know women face a lot of criticism and scrutiny and inequity when they're in leadership.
So I can't speak for all men. I can tell you from my position, I don't think it matters. Male, female, I don't care what party you're part of. If you're going to tell me I have to do something, and even if I understand the reasoning behind it, if I feel like what you're doing is not legal or it's against my rights as a person, I'm going to fight against it. I'm going to have some pushback. I think one of the other things that we run into is, I don't think it's because she's a woman. I think it's because of some of the things I said at the beginning. She was not showing leadership. She was following behind Ohio, who didn't have it nearly as bad as Michigan did. She was a follower. She was not a leader. And then to sit there and say, you know, golf courses are closed, outdoor this is closed, outdoor that is closed. But the golf course right down the road from where she lives had people at it almost on a daily basis. And they were doing nothing about it. She had to drive past those people every single day. And she's not saying, hey, the police need to go do something about that, because I said that's not allowed. Or when she said, I'm going to attempt to open up sections of Michigan that I feel are at less risk of potential having issues. I believe the only section that she opened up was up by Traverse City, which is where her lake house is at, by the way. And then immediately after the weekend that she had it open, she shut everything back down. A lot of people were pissed off because they felt like she was a do as I say, not as I do.
Well, I'm curious here when it comes to the terms of rights. When you say like illegal against your rights, so are we talking like wearing a mask? Is that what you mean?
A lot of people were upset about that. I mean, now
do you have legal right to walk around nude?
I mean,
I think because I'm catching.
I'm just saying, are you not required to wear something to conceal your genitals, right?
I mean, you do have to at least cover.
Would you feel that that's going against your rights?
I don't believe that is, no.
And that's in no way impacting anyone else other than they may not want to see it. So they're asking you to wear a mask so that people don't die. So is it really going against your rights? I have no problem with anyone who disagrees and wants to walk around naked. I'm just making a point.
It's like the signs that say no shirt, no shoes, no service for a business. Like you have to have those things on to enter my business. Now, if you want to walk around the street like that, okay. But in here, right here in this field, in this business, you're not going to come in here indecently exposed.
Well, right. And for instance, I mean, you know, for them to take away her orders, but then come out and say, you know, I've had customers come into my auto repair shop and I have a sign on the door that says no shirt, no shoes, no mask, no service. Mm-hmm. A lot of people don't know this, but the whole no shirt, no shoes, that's not a law at all.
Right. It's a business criteria to consider business, which they have a right to enforce.
Right. As a business owner, you have the right to say, well, if you're not going to wear a purple shirt when you come in here, you're not allowed to come in here. It's my property. I can make that call if I want to. Now, as far as the mask thing, like, I personally don't feel like it was against my rights. It really wasn't a big deal because I go from my house to Speedway in the morning to grab some vitamin waters. I throw on my mask for 2 minutes while I'm in there, and I take it off as soon as I walk back out and get in my truck, and then I go to work. So I'm not really dealing with having to wear it all the time. I'm very fortunate. My fiance does the grocery shopping and all that stuff. I don't have to go deal with walking around Meijer and wearing a mask for an hour or two. It would absolutely drive me nuts. I stood in Home Depot one day for 35 minutes and my face was sweating, breaking out, itching. It sucked. I hated it. And I was like, I'm not doing this shit anymore. I'll wear my mask.
Somebody might say, would you rather be uncomfortable on a ventilator or in a mask?
And I don't disagree with you, which is, I mean, I could have peeled the mask off, but I'm just like, I'm not going to be that person.
Or possibly got a more comfortable mask.
I mean, the one that I was wearing was one of those, you know, neck stretchy ones you just pull up.
The sleeves.
Yeah. So, I mean, I personally, I'll go as long as we have to with wearing masks, you know, when I go into the store and stuff like that. It doesn't bother me enough to not do it. But in the same sense, I don't feel like a governor has a right to say you have to absolutely wear a mask. I feel like if I own a business and my customers are comfortable coming into that business without wearing a mask, and I'm comfortable with them coming in without wearing a mask, I should be able to own that. Since I own that property and I pay the taxes and all the bills, I should be able to make that call. And if my customers are comfortable coming in without one and me not wearing one, they should be allowed to do that as well.
Would
So
you
it's
say
public
then that it
health,
would be
not the
understandable to be open to litigation, lawsuits, wrongful death suits, and things of that nature if anyone related to that interaction passed away? Would you feel that it's justified then to have to deal with that expense and that problem? Because that's what's going to happen. If you're saying I should be able to open and I should not have to adhere to this mask regulation, if someone dies and it can be traced back to someone that was at my establishment, I should be held liable because that person would not be dead if you were adhering to those rules.
I mean, unless they got it from me or one of my employees, I don't think I should be held responsible.
They could get it from you or one of your employees that infected someone else who went somewhere else and infected someone else. That's the problem of COVID. That's, again, why we're in the situation we're in, because you can make a personal decision that can affect someone lifetimes away.
Oh, yeah.
That you may never encounter. You may never actually see a person that you've infected and killed. But it, again, can be traced back. I'm not saying you personally. I'm just saying the situation.
This is more of like a devil's advocate thing. Like, I understand where those people are coming from with, you know, okay, I'm going to the park and I'm walking or whatever, and people are telling me that I'm supposed to be wearing a mask because technically I'm out in public. Now, I get those people saying, okay, I'm outdoors, I'm out in public, I'm not sitting here like walking hand in hand with some stranger. I shouldn't have to wear a mask or any of that. I just literally telling people that if you were out in public without a mask, that you could get a ticket for it.
It's not outside. It's only in buildings.
Yeah, there's no executive order for being out in public. Can everybody hear me with my mask?
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh, that was just to prove a point that everybody can still hear you. I can still breathe. I can still do everything in my mask that I wear all day, every day. But on a different note, so say right now I'm in my office, I'm in public, there's no one in here. As soon as I go into a commons area or an area where other people be, I must put my mask on. If somebody comes in my office, I must put my mask on. The one thing that's, and I think a lot of this is going back to during COVID-19 civics lesson, what are executive orders and what they actually say. So the actual penalty was not directly addressed to a citizen that was in the establishment without a mask. It was a penalty to the establishment. So if I own a store, my wife and I, we have a mom and pop shop. If I don't enforce the mask mandate for the business, then my business receives a fine. Now if I have a mask mandate and someone is not following it and I contact law enforcement and somebody is not following the guidelines for my shop, they can, first off, it's like trespassing. Secondly, they can be fined criminally for not adhering to the mask mandate if they can't produce one.
Right. Now,
so it's so many kind of gray areas to its enforcement. But that's one thing I'll say. The other problem with executive orders is you have to write a new order to eliminate what was in the last order. And that's also why there's so many different orders. So if you say you can only have crowd sizes maximum 20, then you have to write an order that says crowd sizes can be more than 20, but whatever.
Right. So to go to your point, what you were saying about how like the owner of the establishment can be held accountable. Here's the issue with that. If I have a sign on the door that says you're supposed to wear a mask so that my customers, I mean, it's plain as day on the door, you're supposed to wear a mask to come in here, and they choose to come in without a mask. I'm not the police. Yes, I can look at them and say, you're supposed to be wearing a mask, But if that person, especially in today's world where people get short-tempered, short-fused, and get wild real quick, decides to get an attitude and haul off and deck me in the face a few times, not saying that that would for sure happen, but I'm not the police. I mean, I can tell that person they need to put on a mask, but I'm not going to put myself at risk of getting into a physical altercation with somebody because they don't want to put one on. That is
But then you call the police. That's what you do. You call the police and have them come out, and you haven't broken protocol. So when the police get there, you file the complaint. This person is in my establishment, not wearing a mask. I've requested that they do so because it's on the sign. I don't have to talk to anybody. I don't have to confront anybody. If I see you in here and you're not wearing a mask, I can just go call the police. So you're not going to get fined because you're doing what you're supposed to do. So again, the measures are in place for fairness. It's just the people that just do not want to adhere to it, and they're fighting back. I mean, I'm going to sit here right now, and I'm going to tell you, those dudes that got arrested today, were they going to do what they wanted to do? Possibly. Were they going to be effective? Very doubtful. So the end game of wanting to take her to Wisconsin and hold trials, so basically you're saying it's a citizen's arrest. The fact that you have people that are conspiring to potentially take lives, to kidnap people because of this, I feel is ridiculous. How long have we been dealing with situations where people saying rioting isn't going to get anything done? If you want change, you shouldn't be out here burning businesses down. But yet we have those same people conspiring to kidnap a human being, throw Molotov cocktails, blow up overpasses, use IEDs, all this nonsense because you don't want to wear a mask.
And that's
that just makes no sense. So it's like, I understand where you're coming from, and you want things to be more. There needs to be more parity. I understand that, but again, you're talking about a situation where people are hardline. I'm not doing this. I don't want to do this. I don't care. I'm not doing it. And those people are vocal enough to incite violence, actual violence. People have been attacked for asking other people to wear a mask. So yeah, I'm not saying that anybody should confront anybody. You're not the police. That's not your job, but you can call the police. And making that call is enough to absolve you from those fines. You've done what you needed to do. So again, I don't feel like she's being unfair in terms of the mask situation. The business is not being compensated. That's a problem. That's definitely a problem. It's affected us, and we're going to be hard to recover from it. But man, you can't be out here trying to kidnap people. I mean, it's just fucking ridiculous. It's ridiculous. I'm sorry. But we've gone pretty long tonight, and I do appreciate you guys, being here. If there's any closing arguments, feel free. Hopefully Vernon's not gone. It's gone on my screen, but
I would just say his camera off. He's still there.
Okay. So yeah, go ahead, moderator, if you have anything you'd like to do to close.
I just want to note that it's always the government's job to protect public health interest. So if she did not take an aggressive and progressive stand, the outcome and the consequences would have been significant and severe. So you don't have a national standard to go by or as a framework. What you do is look to your neighbor. That they do this all the time. Let me look to my neighbor. Let me look to a guidance to see what would be a good plan to implement. Let me start from their plan and see how I can tweak it for our state, our cities, our areas to figure out how this would happen. So that's a note that we have to, understand. And the problem I felt like this entire time is that it's been capitalism over humanity. And that's problematic because everyone has been so concerned about the economy. And not to say it's not important, but the economy will always come back. We always will come out of a recession, but lives lost are irreplaceable. The pre-existing condition that you inherit once you contract COVID is unchangeable. A person who's had COVID, that lasting effect is forever in their lives. So we have to really think about her strategy. Was it driven to protect and save or to punish? Because a lot of people felt like she was trying to be punishing and trying to be power hungry and power driven. So that's my thoughts. That's Professor D's thoughts.
Vern, got any closing?
Hey, all I'll say is for everybody out there, it's not worth arguing and discussing. We got 4 people, 4 different points of view on many topics. It's not just a bunch of Democrats and one Republican. It's not a bunch of liberals and one conservative or three conservative and one liberal. These are just a bunch of people talking about things that we all talk about on Facebook, but we're not hiding behind the keyboards to make our points. But if I had to throw out a little advertisement, people, I know how many people post about these are the best two candidates that we can have, and this country sucks and everything. I just looked at my Farmington ballot. There's way more on this ticket than just the President of the United States. Way more on this ticket than just the President of the United States. Your local school board are being determined right now. The state school board is being determined right now. A seat in the United States Senate is being determined right now. Congressional seats, all types of things, county sheriffs. So especially my people that want to complain about police brutality and things like that, or, you know, if I'm in Kentucky, I want to complain about the attorney general. Guess what? All those people are elected officials. So it's not just Donald Trump, Joe Biden, and there's even more people than them and Joe Jorgensen on the ballot. Get out and vote. About that life and want to complain, do something bigger.
Preach. Brandon?
I think tonight was a great conversation. I'm glad everybody that did show up to watched. Make sure you share it, get it out there. If you're interested in any of the topics that are going on in the world that we live in on a day-to-day basis, obviously reach out to Johnny or, you know, on the actual show or the page for the show. Make sure you say something if you're interested in coming on, talking, so that it's not just our four perspectives. Obviously, more people is better. Wear your damn mask. Like, I understand, you know, you don't want to. It's uncomfortable. It's hot. You feel like you're being forced to do something, blah, blah, blah. I live a day-to-day life just like you do. I come home. I'm at home. I drive to work. I put it on for 2 minutes in the gas station. I go back out to my truck. I take it back off, and I go to work. I'm behind a plastic shield at work, and I have the X's on the floor to keep people at least 6 feet away from me so that I don't have to wear one all day long. Use your head. It's not that hard. The whole I'm going to kidnap people and blow things up because I don't want to wear a mask, there's no help for you. I'm sorry. Just stop. It's ignorant, it's foolish, and you make humanity look worse than it does on its own.
All right.
Well, wait, Johnny, can I give a plug before you close out? Just a real quick plug.
Go right ahead.
I am doing a voting one-on-one webinar on Tuesday, October 13th from 7 to 8 p.m. via Zoom. What I will be talking about is maximizing the power of your vote and defeating voter suppression. So I will give you information that you may need to know about the ballot. I'm actually going to provide a ballot cheat sheet, give you bio information on all the candidates on the ballot. So if you want to join that, feel free to tune in. I'll send the flyer to Johnny and he can share it on his page so y'all can see it.
Check it out. In closing, ladies and gentlemen, I do appreciate you watching. This was a pretty interesting conversation. I learned a lot today. I do appreciate all the fact checking. Thank you very much. I'm doing the head thing again. I'm sorry. It's a habit. Look, if you don't want to wear a mask, of course, that is your right. But again, you have to be recognizing that there are consequences to those actions. And unfortunately, those consequences are far reaching beyond legal stature. You can affect other people's lives. Like I said, I'm a diabetic. I don't want to die. I don't want to encounter somebody that just felt like they didn't want to wear one, and now I'm going because of it. So you got to think about other people. And that's really one thing that we're not doing today in 2020 is thinking about other people. We're really focused on ourselves and what affects us, which you have to do in life. But at the same time, you still need to recognize that there are others that have to exist around you, and you need to be cognizant of those lives. So ultimately, do what you have to do. You know, do what you got to do to help the man next to you, because that man next to you might have to help you someday, and you don't know that. But ultimately, again, as far as the show is concerned, I would love to have other guests. We have infinite topics that we can discuss. We can repeat topics if we need to with different perspectives. So please feel free. As you can see, watching my episodes that we've put up thus far, this is a safe place. We're not here to villainize. And regardless of what may happen in the comment section, we are always going to be civil. You're never going to be ostracized for your beliefs in my arena. regardless of what those beliefs are. I don't care what they are. I just want to know. I want to understand. And the only way we can understand is if we communicate. And we're not doing that today because all we're doing is sharing memes. So I know there's a lot of people out there that know me personally that feel that I'm a troll because of what I've been doing. And I'm here to tell you I'm not a troll. But I'm going to stand up for what I believe in, and I'm willing to do that even in your arena. So you should be willing to come into mine to state your facts. Please join us. That's all I can say. So again, thank you guys for participating tonight. This was great. If anybody wants to drop in the comments some particular topics that they'd like to hear us discuss, I'm open for that as well. I always want to get more material. I'm very passionate about certain things, so some things I may decide to talk on, but you know what? Other people are going to get opportunities that you've seen previously. So difficult discussions. I would love to make it more difficult because I want to hit some hot button issues, but I really need people on both sides of those issues to participate. So please get with me. Get with anybody. If you know Vernon, if you know Brandon, if you know Stacy, get with them. Like, hey, I really like to do this. Or, I'm unsure. Tell me what it's about. Please reach out. Let's talk. Let's discuss. Let's grow as people. Good night, everybody.
See you guys.